Hello, and welcome to mentorDINO. I'm your host, Katelyn Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. I firmly believe that architecture, engineering, and construction professionals can achieve true success by embracing human skills as their guiding principle. So each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the AEC industry as a way to share stories, inspiration, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So if you like this episode, please do me a favor and hit subscribe, like, or leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own career journey. So let's dive in. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I would like to welcome Megan Shapiro, Esquire, founder of Construction Contract Coach and partner at Radoslavich and Shapiro Attorneys in Sacramento, California. Thank you, Megan, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about your podcast.
And I'm excited because we're going to be talking more on the legal side of the AEC industry, and I haven't had an attorney on the podcast yet, so hopefully you guys are all in for a treat. But I always start out with my loaded question to start out. So do you mind introducing yourself and letting my listeners know a little bit about your experience and journey so far in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you already said, my name is Megan Shapiro. I am a full-time practicing construction attorney here at our law firm in Sacramento. I've been doing this since, I joined the firm in 2012. I've been an attorney for a few years longer than that. I was a baby lawyer when I joined. And then it was right at about a year ago when I decided to start my side business, because I sort of realized like the stuff that I do with my construction clients at the law firm, a lot of it is not state specific. It's not even trade specific or party specific. And so I kind of realized if I put my head down and thought it through, I could probably figure out a way to help more construction companies outside of just California without having to use my law license. And so that's what sort of led me to sort of start my side venture, where I sort of try to help construction leaders with their contracts, with proactive risk management, with negotiation skills, persuasion skills, strategic communication, things like that. And so I started doing that about a year ago. And I have really sort of, I think, found my groove as a woman in two male-dominated industries, right? Like the law is still very male-dominated. And I do identify as being a part of the construction industry because I spend most of my time working in that space. About 95% of my law practice is construction clients. So I really obviously enjoy it. It's really where I found my true passion lies. And I just really, it lights me up. That's my passion, is really helping construction companies and clients. So that's a little bit about my background.
Yeah. So I understand how niching works on the architecture construction side, where we fit into particular project types we typically work on, because there's so many different details and nuances with it that it helps when you start to focus in so you can be a little bit more of an expert. How is that niching down to the construction side of law?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because when the firm was originally founded back in 1995, it was originally founded on construction and trucking, actually. And by the time I joined in, what did I say, 2012, the construction practice was a very small portion of the practice. And the partners at the time, the other partners besides my current partner, they didn't really view it with much high esteem. There were, comments thrown around like a monkey could do construction litigation. Yeah. And so they would use it as sort of the training ground for new lawyers. It just kind of got constantly passed down to the newest attorney in the firm. And so when I joined as the newest attorney in the firm, they were like, here you go. But I got really lucky because at the same time that I joined my firm, one of the firm's largest construction clients at the time had just hired a new general manager. Like we were literally I think a month apart. And he came in and was sort of looking at their legal budget and their legal spend. And he was like, you know what, I want to really dive into this myself and kind of figure this out. And so he and I came in at the same time, and I was like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing with this either. And he was like, I don't know what we want to do either. So I was like, this is a great opportunity. We can build this into what we want it to be to serve your needs the best. And so we did that. And through that process, I uncovered a previously unknown love for concrete. They are a concrete subcontractor. I actually love concrete. Like, I got to go to World of Concrete in 2017, and it was like the highlight. I can't wait to get back to World of Concrete again. But so I sort of built it up, and I went to the partners at the time and I said, hey, this doesn't have to be the training ground for new lawyers anymore. I actually really love this, and I want to dig in, and I want to build up this practice area. And one of the partners sort of brought me, pulled me aside and said, look, we'll support you if that's what you want to do. But I'm just letting you know that from the perspective of some of the other partners here, you're going to be limiting your opportunities. You're going to be limiting your career growth because they view this practice area with such low esteem. And that was hard to hear, but I was passionate about what I was doing. And I knew that they didn't see it for what it really was. And they didn't appreciate how nuanced and what opportunities there were for some real strategy building there. And so I said, I don't care. That's fine. I want to do it. And so fast forward. And of course, those partners are no longer here. I've built up the practice. Like I said, I think it's about 95% of what I do now. So I work with owners, GCs, some design professionals, some material suppliers, but primarily subcontractors. I always say subs have my heart. Like, I started with subs, and I will always be with subs. I still have that same concrete client, and I've added many more to my portfolio of practice now. So it was not anything I ever was like, you know what I want to do? I want to do construction law. Never even crossed my mind. I actually came from a criminal law background before I joined the firm. But I believe that the universe puts us in the path that we're supposed to be on. And I couldn't be happier that I sort of fell into construction law and then fell in love with construction law.
Yeah. So because there's always the three parties of the contract, not to discount the subs for half a second. Do you have to represent the different entities differently because of that tripartite contract setup?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on what my role is as an attorney, right? So originally, when I first started doing this, I was mostly litigation. So I wouldn't really get involved until the project had gone south, right? Now everybody's suing each other. That's a much different role than maybe negotiating the contracts on the front end or helping with mid-project disputes that we're trying to resolve before it gets to litigation. And so it really depends on what my role is, but absolutely, right? Like, if I'm negotiating a contract, the positions that I take are going to change whether I'm representing the owner, the GC, the design professional, or the subcontractor, because their desires are different, particularly when it comes to risk management. The number one function of a contract when it comes to construction is to reallocate risk. It is to shift the risk to the downstream contracting party, right? And so when I'm the GC, I want to push down as much risk as possible. But when I'm representing the subcontractor, I'm pushing back on that risk allocation and trying to figure out better ways to allocate the risk that's more fair.
Yeah. Because I guess I wouldn't think of it up and down. Because I guess we would have that if I have an engineer as my consultant, like, it's passing through me a lot like how the subs contract is passing through the GC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Point. Yeah. And I know I've even had, like, I think it's one of my earlier projects I always noted as like the project that everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I learned so much. Yep. But I even had a lien put on the project, and I'm like, okay, studying for my exams and learning the legal side on what a lien is. And everybody else I talked to is like, oh, you'll never hit that on your project. I'm like, already did, not even licensed yet. And learning the legal side and what it means and what's happening and how everybody's pushing things back up if they're not getting paid. Yep. So it's all very important.
It is. Yeah. And liens are obviously like the biggest hammer, right? Like, that's kind of like end game for any project. And so that's what everybody is sort of working to avoid. So liens are interesting, very interesting.
Yeah. So have you built up the practice side within the firm? Like, is it now restructured a little bit so it's a full-on practice and you leading a team of people doing the construction side?
Yeah, absolutely. My current partner, he obviously does construction as well. He's the one who founded the firm in '95 on trucking and construction. So he has his own construction practice as well. But absolutely. I mean, like I said, it's pretty much all I do at this point, almost
Hmm.
all I do. So yeah, I'm managing associate attorneys. We have other partners within the firm that work with us on certain aspects of particular construction cases. And yeah, I mean, I definitely built it up. We went from, I would say, what were probably two or three main clients back in 2012 to dozens at this point for sure.
Yeah. And then are you guys typically, I know architects were more funneled to use the AIA contracts. Are you
Yeah.
guys using those, or are you recommending contractors and subs go a different direction than what's put on the AIA?
So again, it depends on which party I'm representing, on which types of contracts I would prefer. As the sub, we're almost always on the receiving end, and we don't have a lot of leverage, right, to like be proposing our own contract, unless it's with our own sub tier or our own vendors. But we're usually on the receiving end. When it comes to GCs, I usually tell them to push back on the AIA contract, or at least do quite a few of the revisions that are, of course, you know how AIA contracts work. You track the changes and all that stuff. So there are certainly provisions of the AIA contract that I absolutely hate for anybody other than the owner. Like absolutely hate. So I will push back on those pretty hard. If I'm representing the owner though, like I'm usually pretty fine with an AIA contract. I think it's a really great way to save attorney costs. We don't need to reinvent the wheel if there's a contract that is going to be adequate to meet our needs or at least be a very good starting point. But it just depends, again, on which party you're representing, on which ones. Consensus docs is another one that does, sort of pre-made contracts that you can sort of use as a starting point. There are other options out there, but certainly if I'm representing the owner, I'm all about AIA, and if I'm not, I'm against AIA.
Which I can definitely tell as I've gone through contracts. It's okay. This statement definitely favors one entity of the tripartite than another, and
Yep.
where that risk is. So that's why I always find that language, if you're all trying to come together as one, yeah, you're all trying to save your own butt, but at the same time, like you still have to get the project done and make sure it's amendable. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually working with a GC right now who reached out specifically because I primarily work with subs, and he said, "Hey, would you ever consider working with a GC, even though you're like the sub person? Because we want you to draft our contracts so that they are actually subcontractor friendly. We want to treat them like true trade partners. And so we figure what better way to actually give subs friendly terms than to have the subcontractor person be the one that helps us." And so I was like, absolutely, sign me up. And when you're looking at something like that, you're going to have to start from scratch
mhm.
primarily, right? I mean, you could certainly take a standard contract and start from there, but by the time you make all of the changes, it's probably going to be cheaper in the long run to just start from scratch and draft it from the ground up to make sure that you're accomplishing the goals that you have.
Yeah. Is there, I guess, is there a requirement, like if I, as the architect, gave the GC like an AIA contract, are they liable to have to use that all the way down, or is that contract between them and the subs going to be different?
It will almost always be different.
Okay.
There will likely be what we call like a flow through provision, wherein the contract between the GC and the subs is going to have language that basically says, to the extent that we're bound to a prime contract, you're equally bound.
Yep.
I'm paraphrasing, of course, but language like that. But it'll just be one part of a completely separate standalone contract.
Gotcha. And so, do you have any advice that you would wish everyone in the AEC industry would know regarding contracts? I know
Yeah.
it's hard because it's
You know what? It's actually not hard. And the reason why it's not hard is because of what my answer is. My answer is the one thing that I wish everybody in AEC knew is that contracts are negotiable. Particularly the more downstream you are on these contracts, the upstream party wants to give this impression that it's a take it or leave it situation. Like, this is our standard contract. Either agree to it or don't do the job. That's just not true. Like, I get why they want the sub, or the downstream contractors to think that that's the case because it benefits them. But that is absolutely not true. You can always, always, always negotiate your contract terms. And there are ways to do it that you can show the upstream party that the changes that you're suggesting are actually better for them too. Because a lot of times these contracts are relic contracts that their attorney 20 years ago drafted, and it's been used ever since. And there have been some changes here and there along the way, but by and large, it's just the same framework. And nobody's read it, right? Like nobody's read it recently. Nobody's really pushed back on the red lines, and everybody just buys into this idea that like it's a take it or leave it situation. And sometimes there are terms in those contracts that aren't even the best terms for the person who's propounding the contract. And so if you know those sort of negotiation strategies that go along with the red lines that you want to make, there are always ways that you can push through some of these red lines, because they're ultimately better for everybody involved, because clarity is always going to benefit all the parties to a contract. Ambiguous terms, ambiguity, lack of clarity, that always costs everybody money. So to the extent that we can clarify some of these ambiguous provisions in these relic contracts, that's going to be better for everybody. It's going to cost everybody less in the long run, and will hopefully ultimately lead to a smoother conclusion to bring in the project on time and on budget, which is everybody's goal.
Yeah. Do you think it's a fear of not getting the work?
For subs, it's 100% a fear of not getting the work. That's always the driving fear for subs, because they're getting contracts from GCs, and the GCs are saying, we don't know, legal says this is our contract, we have no power to change it. So if you want the job, here's the contract. And that's like, so they're like, okay, well, do I want to make payroll this month, or do I not want to make payroll this month? So for subs, that's 100% always the number one factor. But again, that's why that's my answer to like what I wish they all knew is like, that's not true. You can at least start the conversation. Like you may not be able to get all your red lines pushed through. I'm not trying to say that. Like, don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but you can start the conversation. It's not like a non-starter of even a discussion. You can at least have the conversation. And honestly, if it does become a complete non-starter, then that gives you some information that you might want to have about that GC, because maybe this isn't the project that you do want to take on. Like there is a point of diminishing return when it comes to risk allocation, where the business decision might be, yeah, we need the work, but we don't need it that bad. We don't need it so bad that we're going to be signing a contract that could ultimately end up putting our whole business on the line if this goes south.
Yeah. No, I feel that same pressure on the architecture side, because, you know, a client comes in, you have the pressure of, you don't know what projects are getting put on hold right now, and you want to make payroll. You don't want to do layoffs. You can only project so far on the design side, because the owner can stop work at any time, and it's a lot easier to hit stop on the design side than it is once construction's rolling.
Yep.
But I definitely feel there's not as much discussion on the risk side of that owner in the discussion. It's, does this align with our design strategy or our portfolio, or getting more work from that client? It's like, well, is that client even good to work with from a contract side? Like, are you actually making a profit in the end, or are you just digging yourself out of a hole?
Totally. Like, and how long are they withholding payment? What's the turnaround? What's the retention, right? Like there's so many questions. And I think you really hit the nail on the head when it's like, owners are the least likely in that equation to even consider risk, because they're bearing almost none of it, right? Mm-hmm. The whole design of the contractual relationship on a construction project is, like I said earlier, to shift that risk as far down as possible, which ultimately results in the party to the contract that is the least able to bear the risk being the one that bears the bulk of the risk. Subcontractors are, by and large, the least financially stable of those three parties, because they're the ones that are dependent on 60, 90-day pay periods, turnarounds, change orders that aren't being processed on time, 20% retainage being withheld. Like they're the ones that have like the most risky financial situation for their companies as a whole. And they're being asked to essentially finance these projects and bear all the risk. It's insane. It's insane.
Did you have anything, I guess kind of COVID taught us just the volatility of products and our like having pricing and keeping those prices. And I remember getting a call from the contractor that I had to review a submittal within a day, because that weekend the price of copper was going up. So trying to like make sure I was being a good partner to the subs, to make sure we're not going to hit the owners with a crazy change order. Do you find those terms have changed since
Absolutely.
COVID?
Yeah. So like I never really saw escalation clauses in contracts very often pre-2020, sort of like force majeure clauses, right? Like those were the two big ones that were most impacted by COVID. We still, of course, have force majeure clauses, but now they're different. Like everybody's drafted them. They've changed the way they're worded. But escalation clauses were much more uncommon. I mean, sometimes you'd see them, but nobody ever really thought about them. They were kind of not on the like top 10 list of key contractual provisions to be mindful of when reviewing a contract. It was just sort of like, that never really happens. Post-COVID, it's like the escalation clauses, again, particularly from the subcontractor's perspective, and the GC often, those escalation clauses can be game changers in terms of whether or not it's a project they're willing to accept, particularly when those trades are very reliant on very volatile materials. Steel is one, copper, like you said, even aggregate is one that just constantly is in fluctuation, right? It's like the price of aggregate is always changing. And if you don't have a well-written escalation clause in your subcontract, you're left holding the bag yet again.
Yeah, because I knew I couldn't get mineral wool for a while. I'm like, why can't I get mineral wool? Like, this is usually a perfectly fine product. It's not something you typically keep an eye out for. I know, like, the big mechanical systems, like, their lead times have more than doubled, but at least you already had that in the design conversation of, hey, we need to start getting somebody on board early for it. But it's like the random stuff that just went all over the place and you had to react to it.
Yeah, my husband is a superintendent for a mechanical division, HVAC. And we talk about this a lot because he has many of his vendors that are at 365 days out on new equipment orders. And it's like, we don't even get contracts 365 days out. What am I supposed to do with this? It's wild. And it's interesting. I mean, this goes, of course, beyond the sort of like legal and risk management side, but it's interesting as like as a member of society, and from an economic standpoint, it's so interesting that so many of these supply chain issues have not yet recovered and we're 4 years out. It's like, it's so bizarre to me.
Yeah, and just trying to keep up. I know I've got like an electrical division across the hall from me, so I go I'll be like, all right, what's the lead time on this switch gear and stuff? I'm like, crap, okay. And you're trying to just get it in early enough, but I'm like, I don't even have a contractor on board. I have nothing, and I got to put in the order like tomorrow if we're going to make what the client wants to meet.
Yeah. And like, to bring it back to the risk side, like that's always terrifying because again, the subs are desperate for work. And so they will start doing things like placing these $100,000 orders for projects they haven't been awarded yet because they have to, or they feel like they have to. And like, as the attorney, I'm just sitting there like pulling my hair out being like, let's just pray this all goes well, I guess, because you're going to be left holding on to this equipment. And particularly if it's like not standard issue equipment, it's like customized equipment in some way. It's like, what are you going to do with this if you end up not getting the project, or the design professional actually ultimately ends up changing the design by the time we get to installation? Like what? Oh my, it kills me. And I don't know what the solution is, but it's risky for sure. It's risky.
Yeah, because sometimes there's nothing we can do to try to keep the design. I would love to not have design changes.
Right.
Make my job a lot easier.
I'm sure.
But switching over to the construction contract coach that you started, where did that come from? Where did you get the idea to just branch out beyond California and your firm?
Gosh, nobody's asked me where I got the idea from, and now I have to think about it. It was a bit of an evolution, right? I think I mentioned at the very beginning in my little intro, I knew that there was like value in what I do for my law firm clients, and I knew that there was value beyond what requires my bar license to do. And so it was really a matter of like sitting down trying to figure out like, is this something that would be valuable really? Is there a market for it? Are there people that would actually want this? And if so, how can I get it in their hands? How can I get it in front of them? How can I make the biggest impact? And that was really sort of the beginning of it all. And it went through a lot of iterations over the last year, trying to sort of figure out how to best serve the industry and how to make the biggest impact. And so it started originally as an online self-study course. I still do have that available. It is out there. I don't push it much because I found that, and you probably can tell this about me from just this conversation, a lot of my value is in this part of it, right? Like it's my passion, it's my experience, it's the conversation part of it. And so I kind of stopped pushing the online course because it's like, it's just videos and it's like, you've got access to the videos and here they are, but I'm not there. There's no me part of that other than the videos. And so that was really the shift into like, okay, well, I don't think that this is the best value to people. And so coaching, I think, even though I think that term, I kind of hate that term. I think it's like so diluted and watered down, like everybody's a coach these days. to be honest with you, the only reason I actually even ended up using the word coaching is because I liked the alliteration of construction contract coach. I'm a big alliteration
CCC.
person. Yeah, C3. I'm a big alliteration person, and I liked that. And so that was really kind of how it morphed into that. And so I essentially took the contract portion of the proactive risk management online course, which was much more robust. It's more holistic on risk management as a whole across the company, on 8 different modules talking about a lot of different areas, and contracts is just one of those modules in the online self-study course. And so I sort of took that and then created it into an 8-week or 8 sessions. Sometimes we do biweekly. So 8-session one-on-one coaching package where we basically do that module from the online self-study course, but we do it together. And it's a total of 8 hours, and we work through it in a different way than the online course does.
And that helps everybody outside California.
Exactly.
I think you mentioned that in the intro.
Yeah, because what we're doing is we look at 8 key contractual provisions that are sort of like deal breaker provisions in my mind. Again, all of this pulling from my experience as an attorney primarily doing litigation, right? Like these are the clauses that I see litigated most frequently. These are the ones that are most risky. These are the ones that are going to put you in the most peril. These are the ones that are the most vital for you to truly understand what you're agreeing to in these contracts. And so we pull from California contracts because that's what I have access to and I'm used to working with. But we look at each of these 8 key contractual provisions through a variety of different examples so that my client gets used to reading them and seeing how they can show up in different ways through using different language. And we do use an AIA contract as one of them. Like, okay, this is what you're going to see with an AIA contract. But a lot of the contracts that subs are receiving are not AIA contracts, as we talked about. They're going to be contracts from the GC that are usually almost always customized. They're like the GC's attorney has almost always written these contracts. So I want my clients to get used to reading these provisions in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different languages, in a lot of different manifestations of how those can show up. So they get really comfortable with the language and understanding exactly what it means. And then we work through potential red lines, negotiation strategies to get those red lines accepted, red flag language, and deal breaker language that I would suggest, again, as like with my attorney hat on, these are provisions, if you can't get these red lines through, that I would just absolutely say, like, I would say, don't take the project. I know I can say that, make a business decision, but this is one that's like really, truly deal breaker in my mind. And so that's kind of what that looks like. And so those key contractual provisions are not state law specific. They're not only in California contracts. It's like I'm pulling from California contracts because that's what I have. But the language itself, indemnity is indemnity across the board, right? Like escalation clauses are escalation clauses no matter where you are. Force majeure is force majeure no matter what state you're in. It doesn't really matter. And so that was how I sort of was able to figure out how I could help contractors outside of California still really take true ownership of their contracts so that they could eliminate claims, so that they could win more projects, so that they could maximize profits by doing it through the contracts.
Yeah. Do you find it's more of a language learning? Like it's, here's what this term is and this is what it means, beyond just here's how it can show up, but it's like teaching contract speak.
Yeah, a lot of it is. And what's really interesting is, when you're in this industry, you're reading these contracts all the time. And so you get sort of a gut feel, right? Like you have a general understanding of what you think these things mean. I think the most interesting thing for me, the most illuminating, has been when we do get into the sort of like teaching the language of it all, how people are like, they have these light bulb moments of like, oh my God, I thought I understood what that meant. And that's not at all what I thought I was agreeing to. And that's what I love. That's when I feel like I've made a difference. I'm like, now right? Like now you can make an informed decision. That's my big thing is like, I'm not saying never enter into any contracts that have risk. All contracts are going to have risk. I'm not saying don't ever agree to any risk allocation onto you, a subcontractor. I just want you to be empowered to actually understand what you're agreeing to so that you can make an informed business decision.
Yeah, and be able to find things quicker and maybe not have to call their attorney every 2 seconds to figure it out.
That's why my slogan is sort of like, do it like a lawyer. Like I'm going to teach you how lawyers look at this so that you can save your money on your attorneys in the back end. You could do it yourself the same way.
Yeah. And so that's all for the subs, right? That's what the course focuses on, or you also...
No, that's construction companies across the board. Yeah. Most of my one-on-one coaching clients have been subs. But the contracts that I use in the one-on-one coaching as the examples are all GC contracts.
Okay.
Except, like I said, I do have the AIA contract, but that one, it was given from owner to, wait, let me think about that one. No, that one was given from GC to sub, but it is an AIA contract. So
yeah, because those get passed around and they've got something for everything because they want it to be the one-stop shop of contracts. Are there any, I know since that's more contractor and sub side, are there any red flags you look for on the design team side?
Ooh, that's a really interesting one because, and I don't know if this is true across the country. I don't even know if this is true in Pennsylvania, but in California, it is extremely hard to actually sue a design professional. If you want to sue a design professional for like what amounts to professional negligence for their, alleged deficiencies in the design on a project, you have to go out and find a design professional that has the same license, that's willing to do a declaration under penalty of perjury before the lawsuit is even started. You have to attach it to the initial complaint that you file with the lawsuit itself. And it is very difficult to find design professionals who are willing to do that against their own sort of brethren, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't actually deal with a lot of design professionals who are parties to the litigation. I'm dealing a lot more with design professionals as experts that I work with, right? Like I'm hiring them as expert witnesses to come in and sort of say, this was the problem. And again, they're not pointing the finger at other design professionals. They're pointing the finger at the actual work that was done, or maybe sometimes reports that are done, like maybe, the geotechnical and the geotech report was maybe too old, and the GC, mm-hmm. the owner of the GC should have gotten a more recent one. It's stuff like that. And so I don't have like a ton of proactive risk management advice for design professionals other than like, come and work in California because you're not going to get sued here.
It just takes another exam and a couple other things happening to get licensed in California.
No big deal.
It's fine.
No big deal. Minor barrier to entry. It's not like taking another bar exam or anything. It's fine.
No, but because I know I've never gotten called in as like an expert witness, but I've definitely seen firms and have friends that have to jump into litigation between, it's always, the main factor is always water, and water gets in different ways. And it's, hey, was it the detail? Was it the sub or the contractor that didn't do the details right? Did the details misalign? So that's generally where I've seen kind of architects get pulled in, at least in Pennsylvania, and just those type of litigations and checking that we actually covered what we were supposed to cover in our drawings, and how many opportunities we had to catch any issues along the way. But
yeah, absolutely. Water intrusion is a huge one. I agree with that. And then the other big one out here is it is claims that arise out of or are somehow related to the geotech issues, because we've got expansive clay soils in a lot of our areas out here. And a lot of people don't know how to build on expansive clay soils, but they think they do. So that's definitely 100% when I see the most design professionals, architects, engineers, having a much more active role in the litigation, whether they're actually named as parties or not. Like oftentimes they will be deposed as witnesses because they're the ones who did it. They're not necessarily being sued, but there are questions around, what went into your determination on, doing the designs and specs this way? What went into your determination of the mix ratio? Right? Those types of things. So they are sort of oftentimes tangential parties, right? Or tangential to the parties, but not often actually sued in the cases out here.
Yeah. No, very interesting.
Yeah.
I hope to never be a part of any of that.
Yes.
Besides the one that we had a lien on, and I let the principals deal with it at the time, since I was like a fresh out of school kid. It was like, I don't know what's going on. And now I know what that word means. I did want to switch over because I know you also are an instructor for UC Davis. So you're over in the construction law contractor instructor side over there. So what courses are you teaching there?
So that is part of their continuing and professional education school. So they cater to adults who are already working in the industry. So they have a construction management program, again, usually catering to people who are already in the industry, who want to get this certificate. It's a certificate. Oh my gosh, I can't see certification. The certification program through UC Davis. So it's part of the construction management program itself. The course I actually co-teach is called Construction Law and Contracts. That's the actual name of the course I co-teach. So I've been doing that now for, I think, almost 2 years. And I have a co-instructor that it started out, we would alternate because she also teaches finance, construction finance, which I am not at all even remotely qualified to teach. But she is. And so she was like doing both, and she was getting run a little bit thin. So they brought me in to help alleviate so that she could have some time off. And then some of the quarters, though, they have really high enrollment. And so it took 2 of us. So the very first time they were like, hey, do you guys want to co-teach? And then like just split the number of students, split the obligation, split the fee that you're paid. And she and I, it's so funny. We've never met in person because she actually lives out of state now. But, she was one of those COVID evacuees, right? She left during COVID. So she works remotely. So she doesn't live here. So we've never actually met in person, but she and I just hit it off immensely. Like we just are like 2 peas in a pod. And so we went to them and we said, like, we want to always co-teach together for this class. And when she has to go teach the other one, she does. And then I teach this one alone. But if she doesn't have to go teach the other class, we are always co-teaching together. And I think it's great because she's actually in the industry. She works for a construction company. She took some sort of like contract law types of classes, like as a part of a master's program. So she's not coming at it from like the lawyer side. She's coming at it from the actual working in the profession side. And so I think it's such a wonderful benefit to our students that get both of us in a quarter, because I'm coming at it from like the true legal side and she's coming at it from more of the practical side. So I think it's a match made in heaven. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, that's a good pairing of experience to bring together. So what's the certification? Are they getting certified in construction management or getting recertified?
They are getting certified. So once they complete the program, and I should probably actually know more about the rest of the program. So I don't know all of the qualifications. I do know it's a series of courses that they have to pass, and they do have to get like a passing grade and all of that stuff. But once they complete the series of courses that's required, then they get a certification in construction management. So then that can go on their resume.
Gotcha. Yeah. I've only really known more the standard, like either bachelor's in construction management or the master's track. So certificate's a little bit different.
It's interesting because it's usually like a lot of people who are currently working as project managers, right? Mm-hmm. Or the other big one that we get is people who have been in the field and they want to transition into the office, and so they think this will help with the transition. And then the other one is like people who are not in the industry at all and think that this is like a good pathway into the industry for the first time.
Got it. I went to Kent State in Ohio, and they had a construction management program, and I just never understand why architecture schools don't try to get architects to have other minors and guide them in different directions, because I had time to get a minor, and I got a business minor because I was like, oh, sure, why not? I would never want to do finance because I think I have PTSD from taking financial accounting. But like even the college like supervisors or whatever that are advisors that are guiding you in different directions, I'm like, why did somebody tell me to go get a business minor? I probably would have been better off getting a minor in construction management, because it more aligns and would help with either if I want to go the project management route or if I want to shift into construction, understand the business side of the industry. And I'm like, why is nobody talking about this? There are already programs that if we blended them more, I feel like we would be better off. I don't know.
Yeah. I agree completely. I mean, like my bachelor's degree is in political science, which is kind of like the sort of standard, like this is the bachelor's degree you get if you know you're going to go to law school, which makes no sense. Like it has nothing it did not give me any sort of advantage in law school. It's crazy. And then in law school, to your point about the business, it's like we had one course called the business of law, and they don't even offer it anymore. It was there when I was there, but they no longer offer it at my law school anyway. And it's like, I agree with you. Like, I wish at some point along the way, whether it was in undergrad or even in law school, somebody would have said, hey, like with a law degree, you're most likely going to be in private practice. Those are just stats, right? The statistics show that you are most likely to be in private practice. Get some business acumen, right? Yep. Like take a business, like you don't even have to get a minor, but like take a business class, any business class. But that's why I think it's so funny that like we act like these like professional schools are something different than a trade school, and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a trade school. And it's like, that's valuable, but like, tell me that's what I'm getting, because then I would have
Yeah.
gone out and been like, I personally need to take ownership of like diversifying my education here.
Yeah. Sometimes I've gone to some trades classes here
Yeah.
in Pittsburgh, and I feel like they're better trained than the professionals that have to go get their professional degrees and spend all this money on
Yep.
education and exams or boards for you. And it's like, you guys know how to do everything. Like, it's fine. And they teach you exactly what you need to know as you do it, and then you learn more in the field to
Yep.
perfect that. But they give you the baseline.
Yes.
That, I don't know. I always feel like when I grew up, it was not really, it was more frowned upon to go into the trades and not go into college. And I'm like, if I didn't have that mentality, I feel like I would have just gone to the trades, because
Yeah.
I have a lot more fun when I can do more hands-on things or get my hands dirty rather than be behind a computer all day.
Yes. Yes. And I'm so happy because I agree with you. I think it was the same for me. I don't know. It appears to me based on visuals that we are probably approximately the same age. So same for me, right? It was like sort of like this idea that like blue collar was a backup plan, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm so happy to see that is changing across the board in our country. Is like people are really truly seeing the trades as an option, like as a first choice, not a backup plan. And I think it's an amazing positive change across the board.
Exactly. And that's why I enjoy more working with my contractors and my subs. I love being on site. Hey, how did I mess something up? How would you do it? And you teach me how to do it right, because I want to fix it for the next time I have to do that type of detail. Is that more of a pain? Is that more costly? Would it have been cheaper if I did something differently that you could have done more efficiently with either your crews, or something becomes more difficult that you can only do experienced professionals? Like, all that information would be so nice to know.
I love that because it's like when you're coming at it with like as a professional licensee, you're so focused. Like we've been trained so much that like by the book, right? Like this is the things that we learn. And it's like, it's so disconnected entirely from the reality of what's actually happening on the job site. So I love, love, love that you're like, okay, I want to actually talk to the people who are out there, like boots on the ground. Tell me how I can do this better for you for next. Like, I love that. I think that's amazing. Kudos to you for having that attitude. Yeah. Not all my professionals do. So kudos to you for that.
No. And sometimes I have to teach them the contractor's not the evil person on the job site. Like, they can be fun. So you're juggling so much. So how do you handle all these different parts of your career and keeping on top of it?
I don't know. I don't know. I really like, that's a terrible answer. I know that's a terrible answer. I really don't have a good answer for that though. Truly. I think it's because, I'm truly passionate about all of it. And so it's like that old adage of like, love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life kind of line, right? It's like, that really is it though. It's like, I really love what I do. My husband's in the industry too. So we are even talking about it at home. Like I live and breathe construction. And so it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like a challenge. It doesn't feel like I'm juggling. It just feels like I've just got my to-do list each day and I just go through my to-do list and it is what it is. And it's a terrible, people ask me that all the time and I don't have a good answer. I need to come up with a better answer, but that's all I got.
I mean, I don't really have much advice on my end too on it. So, and I'm juggling multiple things at the same time, and my to-do lists are like 3 different like row or columns of to-do lists, what needs to go where, and then it's like what actually needs done.
Yeah. So like the only thing I think that maybe is a little bit different, and I hesitate to say it because when I do say it, I always get these like very judgy looks in response to this, but I'm gonna throw it out there.
There are no looks besides my face. So
well, that's true, and you've got a really good poker face, Katelyn. So I think you're going to keep it together. But your listeners are probably going to be like unsubscribing from your podcast as a result of this. So I apologize in advance. But here's my answer, and this is a very unpopular Gen Z answer. But I don't believe in work-life balance, and by that what I mean is I have a set number of hours every day that everything in my life has to get done, whether that's law firm stuff, whether that's mom stuff, because I'm a mom, I've got a 5-year-old, whether that's coaching client stuff, whether that's teaching UC Davis stuff, whether that's going to the DMV to renew my license. Like I only have a certain number of hours in every day that every single thing in my life has to get done. And some of those things can't get done on weekends, right? Like the DMV is not open on the weekend. So it's got to happen during business hours. And so I just don't believe in this idea of like work-life balance and having like time where I shut my phone off and I'm like disconnected or I'm offline or whatever that is that's like so in vogue for mental health reasons these days. That is what stresses me out. I feel like it's fine for me to take 4 hours on a Monday to record a podcast and go to the DMV to renew my license because I don't have this boundary of refusing to do work in the evening or on the weekends. So like I'm just always on for all of the things that I always need to be on for. And that is honestly less stressful for me. Mm-hmm. But I think now that I've said it, you can see why I'm like, I hesitate to say it's not a very popular thing to say, especially now, like we're all about like boundaries and offline time and all of this stuff that's like very in vogue for Gen Z and our newest like generation entering the workforce, and like more power to them. But for me, that would stress me out more, feeling like, okay, but like if I'm off on weekends and night, like if I have like a hard, like I don't work after 5 p.m. and I don't work on weekends, and it's like, okay, well then how am I making up the time for the fact that I had to go to the DMV in the middle of the work week? Right? So I don't know. For me, it's far less stressful to just look at it as like, I have a bucket of time and I got a list of stuff that's got to get done. Hard stop.
Yep. And it's not a bad way to put it either. I put hard stops on my actual architecture work calendar for the evenings because I do these podcast interviews. For the most part, they're in the evenings. I rarely do them during the workday, and I try to do them during lunch. Or we get some Fridays off, I'll try to do them then. But if I do it during the day, I am counterbalancing and working later on some other days or working through a lunch to make up for that time. But I always tell my teams, like, if you need me to work late, you just have to let me know in advance, because a lot of the podcast episodes, I get these scheduled weeks in advance. So it may not be, hey, it's a Monday, we're recording this one. I don't have a recording tomorrow. So, I could stay late and work tomorrow, but Monday, no, I have to get off and I have to make this call. But if you need me to review something, let me look at my schedule for the rest of the evening and I can probably put it on a different day if it's not at least a hard deadline. But I at least put what looks like a wall up on the calendar. But then if I need to work, that's focus time for me to work to counterbalance, not like I don't want to take calls at 6-7 o'clock at night every single day of the week. So it's like, get those recurring meetings during work hours, then let me catch up in the evening if I am working in the evenings or weekends on anything. So I don't think it's a bad way, but I do think everybody has to find what works for them. Like, I don't like using the word balance because there are days that I am really out of balance in one thing or another, and I can't do anything for mentorDINO, or hey, it's a weekend and I can't do anything for the architecture firm, but I'm doing a lot of mentorDINO stuff and then family things, like and counterbalancing that I didn't have that evening time with family because I did something else. So I think it's just a different way of thinking about it, but everybody's just got to figure out what works for them.
Absolutely.
Yep. And I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question. And it's, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their career?
Oh gosh, this is a tough one. I think for me, I can't help but approach this question, but through the lens of like, as I said earlier, being a woman in 2 male-dominated professions. And I think probably a lot of your listeners are women who are either in or about to enter into male-dominated professions, right? I mean, and so I think for me, it's sort of like the faster you can sort of find your voice and your confidence and your footing, the better off you're going to be. And I know, like, I say that like, that's like, oh yeah, just find your voice. It'll be fine. Just be confident and you'll be great. Like, oh yeah, it's just that easy, right? Like, no, it's not that easy. I still struggle with it every day, and I'm almost 15 years into being an attorney, right? But I think it's like having it at the forefront and constantly having it something that you're working towards and striving to achieve is the best way that you can sort of inoculate yourself from the downsides of being a woman in a male-dominated profession, the obvious best path to do that, of course, and this is gonna sound like you paid me to say this. You didn't. But is to find a mentor. And if you can, find a female mentor who's been in the industry too, because I love men, and I'm not saying that like we're necessarily different, but our experiences usually are when it comes to being a new young professional in a male dominated profession. The experiences that women have entering into that for the first time is usually different than the experience that most men have entering into it. And so having a female mentor that's lived it already and has walked that path, I think is really truly the best way to really be mindful of like keeping the focus on finding your voice, finding your confidence, and having like regular check-in. I mean, this is all stuff everybody talks about with mentorship, right? Like having regular check-ins, making sure that you're catching up with them, having somebody that doesn't view you as one more task on their to-do list, right? Like they're actually genuinely invested in you and your career and helping you succeed and pulling you up from the ladder that we had to climb. I think that's the best advice that I would have.
Yeah, because that's so important. And I always advocate it doesn't have to be somebody in your office, because sometimes the right mentor for what you need may not be within your firm if you're in a really small office, or if you're in a very large firm, it may be difficult to find the right person because there's just like so many people to talk to. But I remember starting out and people would complain about experiences they had at certain milestones in their life. And as I've hit certain other milestones, I'm like, oh, well, by the time I get there, like they've already fixed the issue. It won't be as bad. And I hit the same issues as them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is an issue that I heard about at a Women in Architecture conference like 7 years ago. And I'm still witnessing it. But I get the ridicule from the women in architecture. I get actually more support from the men in architecture, which is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I am the first female partner at my law firm. There were no older female attorneys when I started here. Well, that's not true. But they were like very not like nominally older than me, like months, right?
Yeah.
So we're not like true mentors. And I was fortunate that like my partner Frank obviously was one of my mentors, and I made that work, but I did not have the blueprint of what it looks like to be the first female partner at this law firm, or any law firm, or in private practice, or certainly a female partner in construction law, right? So like we now have our newest law clerks are both women. And I've really taken that like role seriously. It's been kind of eye-opening for me. I'm like, oh my God, like I can be for them. I mean, I've arrived, right? Like I can be for them the thing I didn't have. And so I take it really seriously, and I try very hard to be constantly mindful, like because obviously I've been with my law firm partner for what feels like forever, right? Like longer than my first marriage lasted. And so we have like shorthand and like we joke and we're, whatever, we've got a relationship and an understanding and all of the history that goes along with that. And I have to kind of check myself sometimes. I'm like, wait a minute, like how are the law clerks receiving what they're hearing and seeing right now? There's like a huge responsibility in that. It's like, I'm fine with it because of the history and whatever, but I don't want them to be fine with taking that from somebody else. So I need to model what they should be willing to tolerate. I need to be for them what I didn't have. And so I think it's super important.
Yeah. Did you find a female lawyer outside your firm to help you, or did you lean more on the internal partner since you had a good relationship with them?
Yeah, so I did have a female mentor in the early stages of my career, but it was before I joined the law firm. And so she was not she was not in private practice. She wasn't in construction. Like, so it was more like she was one of my professors basically from law school. And I had a really great relationship with her, and I definitely considered her a mentor, but it was very different, right? Like she couldn't mentor me on what it was like, again, to be like the young female thrown into a private practice with a bunch of male attorneys and a bunch of male clients in a male dominated industry.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have that. I really ended up gravitating towards male mentors, not just within my office, but even outside of my office, actually. And I learned a ton of stuff. Like I don't mean in any way to diminish the value that they brought to my career. amazing, right? Like I would not be where I am today without my male mentors. I really wouldn't. But I was definitely lacking a female mentor. And I wish that I would have thought to myself, like, it's okay to go outside of the law firm. I think particularly in doing litigation, we're adversarial so often that there's just this like barrier of like, I can't reach out to another female attorney at another law firm because she could be opposing counsel someday. And I can't show that sort of like vulnerability, right? Of like, I don't know what I'm doing, or I need help, or I need guidance, because I might be the one that like has to go head to head with her later. But what was interesting about it was that I didn't have that same hesitation when it came to males. Like I said, I had some male mentors that were outside of the law firm. And I didn't have that same thing. And I think probably it's a little bit generational, right? Where it's like, I'm still from the generation where women were each other's worst critics, and we were all each other's competitors, right? I'm so glad to see that changing. That's my favorite thing about Gen Z. Like they're like, I'm a girl's girl. And I'm like, I love this. This is great. But I'm not. Like, I mean, I want to be. I'm working on being that, but I wasn't raised that way. And so I'm like constantly fighting against that, like that indoctrination really of like, women are the enemy. Women are not here to help each other. Women are competition. And so I think that really informed my hesitation to reach outside of my organization to find a female mentor. And that is hands down, if I could do one thing differently, if I could go back and do one thing differently, that's what I would do. I would go find a female mentor outside of my firm, since there wasn't one here. And like I said, it's my favorite thing about Gen Z, that they're like totally changing that narrative. They're totally breaking that dynamic. They're like, we are girls, we support each other. We're here for each other. It's us against the boys. And I love that. I just absolutely love that.
Yeah. And hopefully change everything for the better.
Yes. Let's pull each other up. I love it.
Yeah. But I wanted to thank you so much, Megan, for taking the time to speak with me. I'll leave links in the show notes below for your firm in case anybody needs any law services out in California, as well as the construction contract coach if they need some additional help and support there.
Awesome.
So
thank you so much for having me. This was a wonderful conversation. I had a lot of fun.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.